My name is Wendy Anastasio. I work for Tampa Electric Company's Manatee Viewing Center, and my position or my title is Environmental Specialist within the Environmental Health and Safety Department. The Manatee Viewing Center actually opened December 1986. The idea was actually born as a result of folks coming in and being so fascinated with the manatees that were congregating here because of the warm water in the discharge canal. And this is TECO property, and there was just a cruddy little old fence, and people would either slip under the fence or trespass to come in here and look at the manatees or fish. So we knew we had something good here. And it started out as folks that work for Tampa Electric Company volunteering on the weekends, and it was only open Saturday and Sunday. And then we put a fence up and had this tiny little guard shack up, and we had folks come out and volunteer on the weekends, and that was it. And that's how it started, and it grew from there. It's one of the few places to view manatees actually in the wild. Even though it's a man-made canal, it's wild.
They're huge. They're not the cutest things on the face of the earth, but it's fascinating to see them in their natural environment.
It's just a really nice, natural way of seeing the manatee there. It's not a theme park. It's not a produced show that you're watching. You're actually seeing the manatee in their natural environment. It's a very peaceful environment.
You know, one of our main goals is to protect the manatee. This is a manatee state and federal sanctuary out here, so we're real proud of that status. Only if you're interested in an animal are you going to want to be educated. So the people that come here are the ones that want to see a manatee, and we can educate them. Now, conservation, I think, is done by all of us as well as our government agencies and our nonprofits and so forth. So I think you need both of them to help all of our creatures who can't speak for themselves. We get our educational resources from a number of partners in the community and in the state, and as well as from the federal government, such as Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and then their scientific arm, FWRI, which is Fish and Wildlife Research Institute. All kinds of folks that have manatee resources help us out.
The education center itself is great. It's a wonderful way for people to see manatees in the wild and get a chance to really see and appreciate these animals.
I think it's a wonderful educational facility, which is probably the most important role that it plays. It educates us not just about the manatees and the other wildlife, but also about our production of power and some of the alternative possibilities. Big Bend Power Station is bound by permits and laws, as any other regulated industry is, to monitor their emissions. So we are bound by permits and laws not to emit X amount of NOx and SOx. So we have environmental precautions on all 4 of our units. This is a 4-unit, 1900 megawatt facility. And each of the 4 units where you see all the stacks out here are all scrubbed. They all have electrostatic precipitators, and they all have the SCR, which is called selective catalytic reduction. And those 3 items, we spent $1.2 billion over the last 10 years to upgrade Big Bend Power Station for its environmental controls. Each season we have over 10,000 students from Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Manatee County come by and tour the facility. We surpassed our 3 million visitor mark in December of '09. So in 24 seasons, we had over 3 million visitors here. And remember, we're only open November 1st to April 15th. So for 5.5 months, we have entertained, whatever you want to call it, 3 million visitors that learned about the viewing center.
The museum that they have here is also quite interesting. It's very simple, so it's easy for people to understand. It was also really interesting to see the skeletal exhibits that they had in the museum and see how lifelike they are and how realistic they are. The thing that really impressed me the most was that they have their digits, their hands are almost the same as ours. The middle finger is just as long as mine is, and that was really quite impressive. And it was good for the kids too. They were able to do some puzzles that were on the tables, and it kept them busy while we could look at the other exhibits.
Our most recent improvement is upstairs in our education building. Our exhibits were kind of old and tired. You know, they had not been updated in probably since the 80s. And we
revamped, redid, remodeled 75% of the museum up there, so that's an improvement. We add exhibits, we add new plants and get folks that can explain the plants and Florida-friendly gardening techniques. So we're doing little improvements every single year. We have a system called once-through cooling. And if you look at my hands, and my hands are canals, and I'm the power plant, this is the intake canal. There's an identical canal on the opposite side of the power plant over there. So there's a big canal over there. The water gets pumped in, and then it runs through Big Bend Power Station to cool it down. So I call it the radiator effect, kind of like in your car where it cools down the systems, and then it goes right out into the discharge canal. So it's basically cooling down all of the processes at Big Bend Power Station, which is a coal-burning power plant. So we are burning coal to create steam to run the turbines to generate power.
While the TECO Wildlife Education Center is great, what's going to happen in the future is an open question. The Clean Water Act actually prohibits putting out such large hot water sources into the marine environment. Most of the power plants in Florida right now have variances on that because they're older power plants. So when new power plants come online, they won't be putting that hot water out into the environment, which means there may not be the sources for the manatees to go to.
The manatees statewide did not fare very well with the cold spell in January. The figures that I have that were as of 1/30/2010, there were 232 total deaths, but of those, 149 were cold stress, and then another 46 that they think were probably cold stress. And more specifically, to narrow it down to right here, the Tampa Bay area fared very well. Most of those deaths, from what I've been told, were down in the Everglades. We didn't have any deaths in the canal. The canal kept them warm. I will tell you the canal was cold, but it was most certainly warmer than the water that was out in the bay and the Gulf. So, they were all huddled in here, most certainly.
My big concern comes from the fact that approximately 60% of the manatees in Florida are now dependent on anthropogenic sources of heat in the wintertime to stay warm and avoid cold stress. So they're dependent on power plant outflows like we see at the TECO power plant. This leads to a concern of what happens if one of those power plants has to shut down or is closed down to make it to be a better power plant that's not creating so much pollution.
In addition to the manatees being in the canal, there's quite a few other marine creatures that come into the canal. And I'm not sure if it's because of the warm water or if it's because of animals aren't dumb. They know where they're safe, and this is a sanctuary. So they know fishermen can't get to them. But some of those animals, such as the black-tipped shark, will just put on a great show. They'll leap out of the water and do their little acrobats and then land back in the water. And the spotted eagle rays too, anywhere from the 12 inches all the way up to the 3-footers, will actually leap out of the water and then plop right back, and they put on quite a show. Scientists don't really know why they do that leaping. They think it may be to knock parasites out, but they're just unsure about why they do it. But we like to say it's because they can.